Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ever Fireside Chat Leadership Series. I have the pleasure of welcoming everybody this morning and then turning it over to our real stars of the show. But my name is Tim Motz. I'm the president and CEO here at the Boys and Girls Club of Bellevue. And I like to say welcome to International Nonprofit Day, also known as Giving Tuesday, a day where really our community comes together, rally around support for nonprofits across the globe. But for us here at the Boys and Girls Club, we thought it would be a great opportunity to share our story of impact, but more importantly, allow you to hear from a couple of our dynamic leaders on our volunteer board, really talking about the landscape of Bellevue. It seems like it was just yesterday that 9 months ago, we embarked on a really ambitious goal to make sure we served all kids throughout Bellevue during the pandemic. And I'm very proud to say that, today, as we speak, hundreds of kids are streaming through our doors throughout sites in Bellevue. They'll get 10 hours of remote learning. They'll get support from caring staff. As of in a few weeks here, we'll be crossing 60,000 meals served, where we're providing hot meals every single day for those kids. And most importantly, they're having a safe place to go, where a lot of institutions sadly have to be shut down. The Boys and Girls Club remains open. I mentioned the 60 plus dedicated staff that are doing that every single day right now. And really, it lends to some truly inspirational work for these kids. It doesn't matter if you're in our preschool program or all the way up through our high school students, you're getting served today in various ways. We have laptops ready to go, but more importantly, we have smiling, caring staff able to help kids through whatever they need right now. And it really goes back to that, whatever it takes. And that's what we're doing right now, whatever it takes. And I think we're all aware as we kind of hunker down for this next wave of the pandemic, that we're going to continue to be in this for the long haul. And the Boys and Girls Club stands ready to serve as many kids as possible. Again, thank you all for joining us this morning. Really appreciate you starting your day with us. I'm very fortunate to be able to introduce a couple of really incredible leaders that have joined our organizations, really on different ends of the spectrum. One who has been with us for decades in Robbie Bach, who's really taken on leadership roles, obviously in his time at Microsoft, but really in the community, various nonprofits, and on the national stage as well as one of our board of governors for Boys and Girls Club of America. Really someone who's been a leader and a great friend to me in the 2 years that I've been the CEO here, helping me guide the organization through what has been some arduous times, of course. And then we have Jane Boulware, who is one of our newer board members, but really inspirational. It takes a special person to kind of lean in during a pandemic, and someone who joined our organization said, "What can I do?" And I want to do more for our kids. And her story is nothing short of just inspirational as well. Leadership through several companies, including Kimberly-Clark, Microsoft, and really just an individual has brought her talents to the Boys and Girls Club, and we couldn't be more grateful on behalf of all of our kids. And these two individuals, we'll talk a little bit about the changing landscape of Bellevue, which I've had the distinct pleasure of kind of being on the inside track with over these last 2 years, watching Bellevue evolve in so many different ways. And it's not just a skyline, but really it's seeing our clubhouses change as well. I'll give you a few statistics just to give you some context. 2 years ago at this time, of the 11,000 kids we saw, only about 35% of those kids were children of color and children who came from challenged low-income backgrounds. Fast forward to today, 65% of the kids that we are serving every single day are children of color. Over 90% of our kids are receiving some form of scholarship, whether that be on free and reduced lunch, or we are subsidizing their ability to come to the Boys and Girls Club due to the costs associated with after school care. And so you're really seeing us kind of double down, whether it's the 3 public housing sites that we're currently serving kids in, whether it's children who are homeless. We have over 40 children who are homeless in our programs as well. And so you're really just seeing the Boys and Girls Club evolve. And I wouldn't call it just shift or pivot for now, but you're really seeing the organization evolve as Bellevue continues to evolve. And so, as I mentioned, we stand ready to continue to do that work. But I think it is important to have context from business leaders such as Robbie and Jane, and really individuals who have known Bellevue for a long time, and are seeing this firsthand on many different stages. And so without further ado, I'd really like to be able to turn this over to Jane and Robbie. The chat box will be open where people can put questions in there. And I know we'll be able to tee those up as we go along. We want to be able to get to people's questions. Again, just a heartfelt thank you for joining us this morning. And Jane, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over and allow you two individuals to have a conversation.
Oh, thank you, Tim. What a great intro. And thanks everyone for joining us. 7:30 is awfully early in the morning and we really appreciate it. At one point, I think Robbie and I were saying, gosh, we hope somebody shows up so we're not just having a chat together. So thank you. So Robbie, why don't I kick it off to you? You've been obviously had a very successful career at Microsoft. You have been a small business owner, all these things. You have been retired for a while and have a lot of opportunities to serve in a lot of ways. You've been very much involved in Boys and Girls Club of America, Boys and Girls Club of Bellevue. Why the club? How did you get involved in it, and what is it about the club?
Yeah, Jane, it's one of those things of serendipity that happens in your life, and you have to grab onto it and take it for all it's worth. Pauline and I moved into Bellevue. We had a son who was a wonderful kid, but very active, a little rambunctious. Pauline decided he needed to be out of the house for an hour. She enrolled him in the basketball program at Boys and Girls Club as a kindergartner. He was on a first grade team and didn't know which end was offense and which end was defense. And so we went and watched him run around confused for an hour twice a week. But it was a wonderful experience. And the next year he asked me to coach. And you fast forward and two amazing things came from that. One, he went on to play Division I basketball at Santa Clara and played professionally in Europe for 3 years. And I got involved in Boys and Girls Clubs. Our real estate agent, Terry Foster, was on the Boys and Girls Club board in Bellevue. She learned that I was coaching. She asked Pauline and I to join the board. Microsoft decided to support Boys and Girls Clubs of America nationally. They discovered I was on the local Bellevue board, and suddenly I was involved in the national organization. I've been on the national board for 15 years. And the thing I reflect on that is, I didn't grow up in a club. And yet when I go into a club today, and I've been probably in 50 or 60 clubs across the country, I feel at home. I feel like I know that club. Every club is different. It reflects the local community, but every club is a Boys and Girls Club. And when I do that, when I walk in the doors, I think, okay, kids must feel this sense of home when they walk in, and what a wonderful thing for them to have. And so, for our family, it has been started with just a boy who needed some time to play, and ended with some really amazing things. Jane, I know your story, our story, we're both from Wisconsin, it turns out. That's sort of a small sidelight to all of this. But your story is a little different. Talk about how you first got involved in Boys and Girls Clubs in Wisconsin, and what that was like and what it meant to you.
Sure. The truth of the matter is I got involved in the Boys and Girls Club in Wisconsin because I was asked. I worked at Kimberly-Clark in marketing at the time and was asked to join the club. And of course, I joined the board, and of course I said yes. But like you, I didn't grow up with the clubs. I didn't know what it was about. I thought it was, a place where kids got together and hung out. And that changed a lot as I got involved. And specifically, the day that my husband and I brought 2 van loads full of boys and girls to Lambeau Field to watch a Green Bay Packer game in the executive suite. Like, I thought I was this hero bringing kids to the executive suite of Lambeau Field. Because if you grow up in Wisconsin, you have to be a Packer fan. It's like embedded. Go Pack Go. As a baby, that's pretty much what the first words are for kids. And we walked into the executive suite, and Lambeau Field is arrayed before us. We have Packer gear signed by some of the players there. We're like, this is pretty cool. And it was silent as the kids took it all in. And I realized that what they were taking in was the buffet of food, the hamburgers, the chicken, the brats, of course, and everything before us. And they said, is this all for us? And they weren't talking about the gear. They were talking about all the food that was laid out. And they watched the game. We had a great time. And when we left, one of the little boys came up to me and said, what's going to happen with all this? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, can I take some of it with me? Because it's not my sister's day to eat and she's going to be hungry. And I think about that now, and we emptied talk about perspective. These are things that I don't see. I don't see hamburgers and brats and things as the difference between me eating or my sister eating and not. So we emptied the bags of the old home buns and we filled them with the food that was left over, and each kid's left with their bags. As we filed through the executive suite, we have the boys and girls carrying their bags of food and took the vans back home. And when we got back home, all the kids left with their parents or guardians. And it was interesting because in the van there was a hat, that the Packer hat, but there were no bags of food. And it was then I realized it's not, it's more than a place for kids to get together. Mm-hmm. What you see when you see the kids having a great time and they're at home. But what you don't see is how meaningful it is for them and the importance of having that safe place to go. And so my experience with the Boys and Girls Club was really in seeing a different perspective and seeing things in a different way. And that's carried through to my experience here as well.
Yeah, Tim was talking earlier about how the composition of Bellevue is changing and how the clubs reflect that, and the clubs are trying to meet those needs. I know you and your son Andy are very involved with kids across Bellevue and the school district.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the changes you see happening there and what that means for the city and what we need to do to support our kids.
Certainly, you're right, Tim. All you have to do is look at the skyline to see the growth within Bellevue. And I'm really proud to see that growth and to be a part and to see the city doing so well. I live right near the downtown park. And when we first moved here and we walked around the park, we saw lots of families and it was really great. And there were a lot of people that, honestly looked just like my husband and I and the kids that we in schools. And the reality is, both of my boys played football at Bellevue High. My husband is now an assistant coach. And through the years, we have recognized and seen a lot of those kids grow up through the years. And the dynamics of the kids have changed. The number of kids that don't have a beautiful home to go to, that live in a challenging circumstance, that honestly came to our house right around meal times because that was the really great meal or the hot meal that they got during the day. We've seen a lot of that change. And you don't need to do anything more than walk around the Bellevue Park now and see the diversity of the people that are there, which is fantastic to see. But it also calls for us to think differently about Bellevue. It calls for us to think about, to think beyond our homes and maybe the view, even when you've lived here for more than 30 years. Certainly it's changed in just the 15, 16 years since I've lived here. And to recognize that as Bellevue changes and all the positive things that are happening, there are a whole lot of people who are living in this community who have circumstances that suggest that they need help and they need that safe place to go.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
So it's same with you, Robbie. You've grown up and your kids have grown up here. Mm. How are you seeing that change over time?
It's interesting. We used to think of the downtown club as the West Bellevue Club. Mm-hmm. And when you walked into that club, it was a lot of sports activity, a lot of kids that I would have recognized from my kids' schools. It was the West Bellevue Club, and there was just an atmosphere around it that was, as you point out, was sort of prosperous. Ironically, the club itself was kind of a dump. It was old and, it was 50 years old and it wasn't very nice. But there was a sense of prosperity around it. And when you now go into that club, it's now not the West Bellevue Club, it's the downtown Bellevue Club. And the club is beautiful. And there's still a sense of prosperity around it because the kids are active and vibrant and excited, but the actual kids there are completely different. And it's a different community. And I think that's powerful. I think it's amazing. But it's a huge change. And, we used to have this dynamic of sort of West Bellevue supporting East Bellevue. And I think that dynamic is fundamentally changing.
I agree.
There's still obviously a lot of wealth in West Bellevue and in the Points communities, but the type of support Bellevue needs as a city has changed dramatically. And we need to figure out how we rally to that and how we make sure that as Bellevue grows, it grows in a way that has a sense of soul for the kids of the community. And I think that's a real challenge for our clubs. Our staff are amazing. It's a real challenge for them. And it's certainly a challenge for our board and the people who support us to try to figure out how to make that happen. And Jade, it speaks to the one other thing I want to make sure we talk about, which is getting all this done. As Bellevue grows, it's going to require great leadership, and hopefully we get great leadership in our government and from our corporate residents in the city. But it's also going to take kind of, I'd say, great leadership from the community itself. Talk a little bit about how you think about that leadership and what's required and where we need to go with that, and what we need to do with that.
I'd be happy to. As you were talking about the club and how it's changed, I've only been on the board here for a bit, and it didn't take long for Tim to get me involved. One of the first things he did was ask me to be a judge for the Youth of the Year at one of our clubs, the downtown, the teen center. So I walked in and, I sat around a rickety table, and first of all, the club was just filled with kids that were full of energy, and they were laughing and they were joking and they were having a great time. And I just thought, this is a wonderful energy. And then we started listening to the kids and for the Youth of the Year, and they were giving their speeches, and the speeches were they were heartfelt, and they were speeches from kids that didn't see that they were going through a tough time and didn't necessarily see a lot ahead for them, and didn't see a really bright future. You could tell that they were feeling as though they were separate or different than than maybe the people around them. And even the way I was one of the judges, to be honest with you, they dismissed me out of hand. I'm that rich white woman who has no clue about what they're experiencing. And the reality is, I grew up in a really in a very low income home in a rural community where there were no expectations for me. And had it not been for someone that was at a pivotal time in my life, I would still be working at the Piggly Wiggly, and probably still in the area, the house where my grandmother and my mother grew up, and so on. And what occurred to me as I was listening to them and listening to the speeches was how important it is to ensure that all the kids, to ensure that as a community that we're including everybody, and that we're making sure that people have access to important things. And as a leader, I used to think it was really important to have all the answers, and that people looked at you as a leader to have the answers. And I've kind of come to realize that it's not so much about having the answers as asking the right questions and including people in that, in solving what are honestly some pretty challenging problems that we have now. So when I think about leadership, I think about that girl and the speeches and the kids and the speeches they gave, where it was because of the club that they saw a future that was brighter and different than what they were experiencing. And it was because they were being asked to their opinion, they were asked to be included, that they were putting themselves in a position to think beyond where they were. And I think as a leadership community within Bellevue, we've got brilliant, successful people that are motivated and keen to make a difference and to make Bellevue inclusive. And I would say as a leader, the challenge is not to think we have the answers and know the answers, but to make sure that everybody's included in putting those answers together and making everyone realize that they're important to whatever it is that we're building together.
Yeah, it's as I reflect on the idea of leadership, I always it fits so well with what you just said, because I think sometimes we get caught up in the position or the role or the idea that we have to have an answer. And when I think about leadership, in particular in this community-based space, I think about the word impact. And I'm trying to think about how I can have an impact in the community. And sometimes that's having an answer. Sometimes that's making a decision. But oftentimes, as you say, it's asking a question, or it's just agreeing to show up, or sometimes it's funding. There's lots of different ways for us to have leadership impact in the community. And I look at all the faces on the call, and I recognize some of the people, some I don't. My bet is that everybody on this call has the leadership skills that Bellevue needs. And the question is for each of us just to kind of find the right place where we can have a unique impact. and it won't be the same for everybody. Everybody will take a different approach. And, I see that on our board, different people are taking leadership roles in different ways. And so I just hope that people, as literally as we're going into the holiday season, we're thinking about, okay, what's 2021 gonna be like? Hopefully better than 2020. What way can we have a leadership impact in what's going on in our community? And because Bellevue is going to need it. Bellevue is changing so quickly and so fast, and we're going to need different leaders with different skill sets at different points in time to have impact and keep our community as strong as it's been for the 30 plus years we've lived here.
Yeah. Well, and we've seen it on the board. We've got just such a diverse group of experiences, diverse group of ages, and so on. And that's what really it takes for us to come forward. I know when we talked about whether we should even stay open during COVID, it was so easy to say, gosh, there were so many reasons to say why we should close. And so many services were closing around us, but it was literally the realization that if we closed, there was no other place. There were no other services for these kids. And so when the conversation shifted from why we should close and why it was the obvious choice to what would it take and what would it look like, people got energized. And that's when we had all the different ideas and all the different people coming forward and made it happen for where we are today, which is pretty remarkable. And I see the same thing happen in Bellevue. When we focus on what do we need to do and what will it take, rather than why we can't do something and how hard it is, that's when I'm seeing the most amazing people, regardless of what your title is or your age or your income or any of those things, that not even regardless, because of that, that's where all the good stuff comes forward.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think about our board in an interesting way. If you went back to that board 10 years ago, there was a very committed group of people, but it was probably 10 people who really committed driving the board forward. And there are now 30 plus people who are all engaged in a different way. It's really quite amazing to me, right?
Yeah.
We have some people who are doing what you'd think of as traditional leadership things, and you'd have other people who are incredibly engaged and having huge impact and not engaged in the traditional leadership role at all. And that's exciting for me. And I hope for everybody on the call, if we can, whether it's with Boys and Girls Club or some other organization, if we can rally people to play various different roles of having impact, Bellevue can both grow and prosper and remain a great place to live in a strong community.
Yeah. Thank you, Robbie. I agree. And as for me, I would not have necessarily gotten involved, but I was asked.
Yeah.
And so I'm asking everybody on this call for you as individuals to lean in and to get involved, and don't be afraid. Don't think that you have to be a certain something, a certain background or anything else. Get involved. We need everybody to be a part of this solution and to invite others to be a part of that solution too. The more we invite to join us in this and the more people we have rallying around, just like you said, Robbie, people contribute in lots of different ways, time, talent, and treasure, right?
Yeah.
To do that. And to me, that going back to you, I think that's what you've been really great at. You've been a leader in so many different ways, from corporate America to private business to philanthropic and so on. The leadership you've been providing and the way that you show up and the way that different people show up adapts to what we need. Have you seen that change as you've been on the board?
Oh yeah, for sure. The last thing I'll share, you sort of alluded to it. I spend some time now. I'm a co-owner of a gluten-free pasta company, which is a small little business. You go from at Microsoft, when I left, there were 9,000 people in my group. There's now 20 people at our pasta company. And so it's a little bit of a different environment, but you do see and an incredibly diverse group of employees. But you do see, everybody trying to pitch in, everybody trying to have impact, everybody trying to keep the company working through COVID and get us through to the other side and all those kinds of things. And I just think of that, as a little bit of a microcosm for what we have to do in Bellevue, more broadly speaking, and how we have to, whether it's a small business, a local restaurant, Microsoft or Amazon, big companies, small companies, we all kind of have to figure out how to pull together. Jane, we got a lot of people on the call. I'm wondering if we should just turn it over for Q&A and let people ask questions. People can, if you have a question, you want to put it in the chat, great. If you like using the little yellow hand on Zoom, feel free to raise your yellow hand. If you want to come off video and just raise your hand, that's all good too. But I'm wondering if anybody has any questions for the two of us, or for that matter, for Tim, who's sitting there looking thoughtful and smiling at us
Yes.
on the call.
I know some of you people on the call, and I know you're not bashful, so feel free.
We have one question in the chat box that is, as leaders in the industry, how do you get your employees and company involved in activism and in getting involved with nonprofits, local nonprofits?
Jane, maybe you want to talk. I know Kimberly Clark. I mean, you've worked at both Microsoft and Kimberly Clark, both of whom were incredibly good at this. And I know a little bit about the Kimberly Clark story, but maybe you want to share how they got people involved, and I could talk a little bit about Microsoft and other ideas.
Certainly. I mean, I look at it, there were three things, right? The first was not obvious. As a company, we had formal giving. So we had, ours was initially through Kimberly Clark United Way. And so there were formal times when as a team and as an organization, we, in a structured way, contributed towards philanthropic different things. Secondly, we did, as a team, to be honest with you, getting involved outside of your core team, it's really easy as an organization. You have your goals, you have everybody aligned against what you're trying to achieve, and it's really easy for everybody to get folks rallied around a specific goal. But when you try to create a team that is more than that, it is really been my experience that getting people aligned around a common goal, around a common philanthropic, something where you're giving beyond yourself, beyond the specific goals, has been really successful and really helpful in bringing people together. And then even just setting up the environment as a leader where you recognize the work that people are doing as individuals. Nothing motivates, I think, something better than knowing the individuals on your team as people beyond what they contribute to work. And if there's something that they're working on and they're keen on it, encouraging that, bringing that up as part of the work that they're doing, recognizing that people are contributing beyond the specific goals that are there. I think seeing people as individuals. I used to think, as leadership, that it was all about fitting in and everybody kind of doing things together and doing the same thing. And the reality is that I think if you want people to be involved in the community, involved in different things, recognize the work that they're doing and tell them as individuals that this is something you support and stand behind it and join them if you can. What do you experience, Robbie?
Yeah, Microsoft's approach was very similar to Kimberly Clark's. The thing that I'd say for the people on the call who are in a leadership position, you kind of have to make a fundamental choice about whether your company or your organization is about the community or not. And if you decide that they are about the community, then you dive in and show your employees that you are about the community and that it's not just something you're doing even just for charity, but you're doing because you think it makes the community a better place, it makes the organization a better place. The gluten-free pasta company I mentioned, the Nini's, is down in Kent. And those of us who are in the leadership there decided that being engaged in the Kent community was important. So in one of those little ironies, we talked with our employees about what we wanted to do to give back to the community, and they decided these are people who make food all day, and they decided they wanted to go work at the food bank. So we have designated days where we go as a team, to Jane's point, to the food bank and sort food there. And so you can imagine people who are doing food work all day deciding that their way of giving back to the communities, they want to go provide food to that community. And I think those little small examples that we can all provide in our business and in our work will demonstrate to others that being engaged in the community is important. And being public about the work we do inside our company so that people know we're engaged in the local community is super important as well.
Yeah. It's a great question.
I see another question in the chat box, which I'm going to pop up here if I can. What do you think the biggest challenge facing philanthropic leaders is today? I don't know, Jane. I can start on that, Jane, if you want. I think for me, the hard thing is choices. For a lot of different reasons, we have a lot of challenges. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in our communities. I think in Bellevue, we're more fortunate than most because our community is probably slightly stronger than most. But I just think there's so many challenges. You want to talk about homelessness, you want to talk about education, you want to talk about kids and childcare. If you know, there's just so many. You want to talk about the environment. There's so many things that you could do to have impact. And I think for philanthropic leaders, it's you know, how do you decide where you're going to have an impact, make choices, and be really focused and try to have impact. It's easy to sort of peanut butter and give a little money to a lot of things or spend a little bit of time with a lot of things. And we need people to really dive in and say, hey, we're going to solve this problem and we're going to be focused on it and get after it. And it's a hard choice because there's plenty of places we can apply our energies.
Yeah. And I agree with that, Robbie. And for me, like I was I worked full time. I had a family. There were a lot of things. And I was never, my husband, I was lucky to be a stay-at-home dad. And I honestly saw all these things that were opportunities for me to contribute towards, but I didn't know where to begin. And I felt as though I had to contribute in a big way and make a big impact, and that, you know, I had to have get really engaged. And I just didn't see that I had the time or the talent or anything else. And I would say one of the biggest challenges is how to bring people in a way that they can contribute whatever their time and talent might be. You don't have to have the answers, and it's okay to let people know that you give what you can when you can, and that things change over time. And I think you're right. There's so many different ways to plug in that sometimes it feels a little bit overwhelming. But as a leader, just letting people know whatever contribution people can make is the right contribution. It's a good thing to give what you can when you can. And that changes over time. I think sometimes people get intimidated and believe that they have to contribute or be a certain way to contribute. And that's not the way it is. There is no one person that's going to have all the answers. So yes, there's a lot of different ways. Plug in where you can and just act. How can people get involved with Boys and Girls Club after this call? What a great question. And Tim, I'm sure you're going to have specific thoughts on that. With COVID right now, it's probably usually we say time, talent, treasure, right? As much as we'd all like to be involved in the clubs, it's with COVID, we're not able to do that because there's strict COVID protocols that are in place right now. We're really proud of the fact that as you know, we've been serving kids 10 hours a day and have not had a single COVID case with our kids. And that's because of the way that we're being really cautious and thoughtful about how we're engaging with the kids. Certainly for those who can, contributing with treasure and working with us as our revenues are down 97% to help us keep the doors open, and spreading the word and making sure that people are utilizing the clubs and coming to the clubs as they can. Robbie, Tim, specific thoughts on that at this time in COVID?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would just say to that is there's been so many individuals who have reached out with that exact question, say, how can I get involved? You know, we realize you're on the front lines working with those kids, and it's so validating. You know, for me, I start with a conversation. I just, you know, it's a phone call, it's a Zoom chat, it's Teams chat, whatever people would like to do. And I sit and understand a little bit more how they'd like to help the organization, you know, and I'm really glad, Jane, you mentioned time, talent, and treasure, because yes, obviously financial resources are important, but every bit as important is the wonderful talents that people bring to the table. You know, we've had opportunities where kids are getting chess lessons, you know, online, where someone is sitting and this is a passion to them and they're teaching kids how to do it. Just recently at our teen center, we had a wonderful donation of basically pie making kits. And we had a virtual opportunity where kids are learning how to bake a pie with a chef, you know, and then they got to take those pies home for Thanksgiving. I mean, really, the sky is the limit when you think about opportunities of people being able to be involved. We, of course, need to do that in a safe way. You know, emotional safety is every bit as important as physical safety. So we ensure that our caring staff are monitoring those chats between kids and community volunteers. But there really is, you know, several different ways that people can get involved. And so, you know, I guess I'll make a plug for, if the staff wouldn't mind putting in the chat, you know, my contact information as well. but I'm always happy to have a conversation with people in the community about how the Boys and Girls Club can become a part of their life in some way.
Right.
Brent Jackson asks, what do you see as the Bellevue Club's biggest needs today, and what about the next 10 years? I think the biggest need today is, we really are working hard on the resource front and really engaging with the school district, the city, and the housing district to try to rally resources for the kids who are in real need. And it's a different type of service, right? We're doing 10 hours a day. That's not something Boys and Girls Clubs traditionally do. So in the short term, there really is, just to be honest, there really is a resource need, and an ability to sort of rally those resources, both people resources and financial resources. I would say longer term, we're going to have to figure out for Boys and Girls Clubs how to serve kids in multiple different ways. How do we reach kids in a way that is personal, to Tim's point, in club, a traditional type of service, but also how do we reach kids who are can't get to a club, geographically isolated, who want to learn virtually? How does that environment take place? We've talked at the national level about the virtual club for like 10 years, and we've experimented with a bunch of different things. And suddenly COVID has forced us to create virtual clubs, and we're starting to figure that out. But figuring out how to blend that both physical experience of being in a club and virtual experience of just learning and having somebody that kids can connect with, figuring out how that evolves over time, I think is a big challenge. I don't know, Jane, what other things do you see?
Yeah, I agree with that, Robbie. I think as the city continues to grow and evolve, we need to meet the kids where they are, right? Because they're not all able to get to the downtown club or the different locations. And these kids need a safe place. They need a place where they can go not only to gather, but to learn, to, in some cases, get, meals and so on. And we need to figure out how to get to where they are and making sure that we have the resources to do that. In the past, we've been funded by the programs and the athletics and the different things that we've been doing, and going forward, recognizing that the nature of the kids that we're serving is different. We need to figure out what that model looks like so that it's sustainable and that we can continue to grow to meet the needs of the community and of our kids as our community grows. Completely agree.
Jane, I think you and I occasionally have these chats while we're walking our dogs, and lately it's been they've been distance dog chats, but I enjoyed listening to you this morning. Thank you so much for sharing with us and sharing everything you had to offer. It's wonderful thoughts and comments, and really appreciate it.
Robbie, likewise. It's been a pleasure. It always is easy talking with you, and I love the chats that we have when we go for walks, and appreciate everybody that's joined us this morning to be part of the conversation. I'm sure it'll be continuing. It's ongoing as always as we're evolving, and I appreciate so much everyone joining us and your time, Robbie and Tim, for kicking us off and leading us.
Robbie and Jane, before we wrap up, we do have one more question from Erica. I'd like to give her an opportunity to ask real quick.
Hi,
Sure.
Erica.
Sorry about that. It just sort of dovetails with the last question that was in the chat, but I just wanted to also say that my children are attending the Boys and Girls Club during this remote learning, and so I've seen firsthand all of the efforts that are going in, and I really appreciate all of the efforts from the staff and the support that they've been receiving. It's been just amazing. But specifically, you mentioned that, of course, this is 10 hours a day, which is not ever what Boys and Girls Club has done, but the remote learning supports have been really invaluable, not just for my kids, but for all the other kids that are in their pods. I see them, all the work that they do every day. What specifically can we do to help support the remote learning support? Is there something in particular that we as a community, I also serve on the Bellevue School Board, so I have, insights from that side. In what ways can we support the remote learning at the Boys and Girls Club better in any way?
Tim, I think that's a question best for you. Jane and I probably aren't close enough to the specific needs today. The one thing I will say, just as Erica, as a broad thought, is we need to understand what works. One of the things that's really challenging on this virtual learning is we don't have any data on what's actually being effective. And so I don't have an answer to that question, but we really do have to figure out how we get feedback on what types of things are working and what aren't. And I think that's a collaboration perhaps between the school board and the Boys and Girls Club. There's an opportunity for us to do something together there to actually evaluate effectiveness of various techniques. I know the national organization is immensely interested in figuring out what's working and what's not working because every club is doing things slightly differently. Tim, you should comment for the local club. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I would say on the boots on the ground level, one of the things we really struggle with is, imagine even in your own household. I have 3 young boys. They're all in different classrooms, so they're all at different paces at different stages. And so now imagine you times that by 100 or even larger at times. And so you're trying to find a way to customize support each child. And so how do we scale remote learning while making it still a one-on-one interaction for that child? Because it's a million things, right? So it's not only making sure their laptops are staying charged or making sure that their headsets are working, but more importantly, if that child doesn't understand, the actual subject matter, are they staying engaged? Is there a caring adult who's standing there helping them walk through the concept that they just missed? And as we know, if you miss the concept in the 3rd minute, where are you at on the 37th minute of the lesson? So we're trying to find a way. Is there a way to remote in technical support? Is there a way, because there's just not enough adult bodies to be going around the room socially distanced and safe to support these kids in that remote learning environment? So one of the questions I would have is, can we find a creative way? And I agree, Robbie, it's a school board, it's a city, it's really it's an issue affecting all youth development agencies that are seeing kids on a day-to-day basis. But is there a way to provide additional academic support real time to these kids while they're kind of muddling through? I mean, I mentioned I have multiple age children, and my poor 5th grader, right, goes in Bellevue School District, does what he can, but even just as he drifts off or leaves the screen, my wife is putting him back in front of that. We made him send an email apology to his teacher because, he had his screen open, but had a few other windows open on the side. And, is there technology to help get these kids back and focused on what they need to do? So, of course, there is the overall equipment needs and the resources that Jane and Robbie mentioned of more bodies, more adults. But is there a way we can be creative about getting additional support remote happening so these kids can have more of a customized experience? Because that's really what they're lacking right now.
Yeah. And the thing too, to build on that, Tim, is there are a lot more people, a lot more kids that need to have help than we are able to provide simply because of the resources. We don't have as many sites open as we'd like to have open, providing as much support as we'd like to be able to provide. I think that's always the case, but it's especially now when we realize that by not having the resources or not having the sites open, there are literally kids that are not in front of the screen that are not getting the help that they need. And that's what's continues to keep us leaning in and leaning forward. I also want to point out, you probably noticed that Robbie just left the screen. It wasn't anything we said or didn't say. It was, he told us in advance that he had a national meeting of Boys and Girls Club that he's chairing and that he's leading and would have to drop off promptly at 8:15. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Turn it back over to you, Tim, to close us out. And Matt, thank you. The chairman, who's been phenomenal.
Well, thank you very much. I will thank Robbie in his absence. And Jane, thank you for sharing your thoughts on leadership with all of us. In these really uncertain times, it's so great to have the community of people who came together for this call. I want to particularly thank members of Bellevue City and King County leadership. It's the partnerships and just all of us coming together to meet the needs that exist in our community through the personal leadership that we can all show that's going to get us through these times and set us up for the future. So I want to thank everybody for your time today. And we really appreciate all that you have done to support the club and the community in the past, and want to thank you in advance for everything that you will do for us in the future. If you would like to stay up to date on what is going on in the club and club activities and how you might be able to provide support in your own leadership, please check out our webpage. It will always have the ability to contact the club and to see what's going on. But thank you, everybody, again, for getting up early with us this morning and engaging in this discussion on leadership. The first of what I hope will be a series where we will come together and talk about issues in our community and how we can work together to solve them. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks all. Happy holidays to you.